Hello, good morning. It's approaching 6 a.m. on Friday the 27th of May. I'm back at my local railway station in Bath, Oldfield Park. I'm just setting off for Salisbury, just as I did 7 or 8 days ago. I'm going back to retrace the first section of Margary's 45B. I just loved it so much last week. There's a couple of places I really want to revisit. And also I'm going to try and tweak the route a little bit just to take out some of the muddy footpaths and try and avoid the A303 in a slightly different way. I'm trying to make it more of a rideable circuit. I've described it using some OS maps, so hopefully that'll give you a better sort of aerial helicopter view of what I'm trying to do. Anyway, in an hour's time I'll be in Salisbury, have breakfast there, up to Old Sarum, and I'll speak to you shortly after I start the road. This circle is Old Sarum, the ancient hill fort. You can see I've got the train to Salisbury station there, that red dot on the black line, as I did last week and today. And then I just rode up through the centre of Salisbury, took this minor road up here, and there's a little track that goes across the field there past the circus up to Old Sarum. A project I'm thinking about later in the year is to ride another part of Margary's 45. Last week was 45B from Old Sarum across the Mendips to uphill on the Bristol Channel. But another section of this road goes this way. This is Margary's 45A. And unlike last week, where there was very few straight stretches, how you imagine a Roman road, I was paralleling it a lot, just trying to guess the closest I could get to it. There's much more intact roads and bridleways, and that's what I'm thinking of doing. And this goes all the way to Winchester. It's going to be way off the map, so excuse the scale, but Winchester would be way over there. Then when I get to Winchester, I can connect with another Roman road which goes up to Silchester. Again, way off the scale, way off the map, and it'd be over there. And then I could join another Roman road called the Portway, which originally ran from London down to Old Sarum. And I could join it and retrace to Old Sarum. And again, keep the straightness of the road much more intact. So I hesitate to call it a circuit. It's more like a very acute triangle. That's a little project I'm thinking about. I wouldn't even say I've got it planned. I'm thinking about it for later in the year. Back to today then. I'm going to replicate what I did last week. Took the track down this minor road, past the school, and there's a really nice footbridge across the river there. I mistakenly said last week I thought that was the River Wiley. Well, I was way out. It was actually the River Avon. One of them anyway. There's 5 in total, I believe, and I think this is the Hampshire Avon. And then I cut through Bemerton there, entered that quarry. That's where the workmen said they would let me through, but they knew I wouldn't get underneath that railway because it's double gated and padlocked, so they sent me back along the main road. Very friendly, very helpful. And I cut through Wilton, and that's where I joined this road. That is actually part of the Wiltshire Cycleway. It runs up to along the left of the River Wiley with the main road on the other bank, and the railway keeps snaking across it. One side it's on the right, one side it's on the left. And then I filmed there at the start of a track heading up, and this is the bit I really want to revisit, Groveley Woods. That's where the myth of the witches, and I now know there were some pretty brutal murders up there, and there's some shrines. That's what I really want to visit. I'll talk to you more about that when I get there. And then I came along here, and then this is the section where I filmed, and I said, oh, this road is very familiar. If I turn right, I could have dropped off that ridge down to Wiley, join the Wiltshire Cycleway back that I'm very familiar with. And I cut across here this track, not that yellow one, this one. And this is the section where I did some more filming. I just love this. And then what I tried to do was go up there to avoid the busy trunk road of the A303. I went up through Stockton Woods, did that very sharp left-hand turn. That's where I got a couple of bites off that electric fence, and then tried to join it down there. What I ended up doing was coming back down to the main road there, and had to ride along it anyway. And then I took that path through there, rejoined what I should have done there. This time what I'm going to do, to make this more cycle friendly, I'm going to head south to avoid the A303 and try and come up and get on that track from the south. The idea is to make this just a much more cycle friendly route, and then this is the Great Ridge section, which I absolutely loved. And then I had my lunch. I think I went down there because that was very rideable. That's pretty much where I had my lunch. Not there, there. And then just off here, there's actually that junction. That's where after lunch I filmed there, and sort of said there was a road going off to the right where there was a blue sign, the police and the highways agency were warning you that campers would be moved on. But that's what I intend to do today. Actually take that down there. Again, I think that's going to be much more rideable. Bridleways, byways, down to Sutton Venie, head back to Bath on much more familiar roads. I really do want to ride some more Remin roads, and my experience of last week is I think I've decided on a ground rule, and that ground rule is going to be I'm going to avoid footpaths. I'll take byways, bridleways, farm tracks, minor roads, but I will avoid footpaths. And that is because I didn't film it last week, but there was at least half a dozen times, possibly a couple more, that I had to decant the panniers off the bike and lift them separately over a stile and then try and get the bike across the stile. And it just felt like Russian roulette. If that wood was wet or my shoes were muddy, it just felt like it was only a matter of time before I slipped and really hurt myself, and I'm just not prepared to do that in future. I'll try and stay as authentic as possible to Remin roads, but not using footpaths. It cost me so much time and so much grief for basically no payback last week. So that's my plans for today, and that's like a framework I'm going to use in future. I will be adventurous, I will explore, but I will avoid footpaths. Anyway, back to today. It's 8:03 and I'm now up at Old Sarum. That's that view looking back across to the Avon Valley, and there's a pretty good side-on shot of Salisbury Cathedral there. And there's the gates of Old Sarum behind me. Probably going to be dazzled because the sun's straight in my face. Last week I went around that way. This week I'm going to circle Old Sarum that way. I did look at going in, maybe getting a later train down, going in, because it doesn't open to 10. But again, there's quite a bit I want to do today without having to rush in as well. And so that's for another day. I did notice there's a campsite down there and those recreation fields I've just rode up past. I may possibly integrate that into a trip I've got planned. I mentioned it on the mapping section at the beginning. So back there would be Margary's 45 going that way. So the way I went last week was the way I'm looking, 45B up towards Charterhouse and potentially uphill on the Bristol Channel. That way it was another section, 45A, between Old Sarum here and Winchester. That's what I'm going to try and ride later in the year. I may even build it into a camping trip, and possibly when I get back here stay at that campsite and then come up here and visit this in my leisure. Last week I mentioned I ground down 4 brake blocks, so they've all been replaced, everything's cleaned up, the bike's running nicely. I also broke a cleat off one of my shoes, and really I had ridden the shoes to destruction. So in a nutshell, I bought a new pair this week. I got them from Hawford's, they're called Ridge, they cost £35 and the service was absolutely excellent. That's what they look like. Touring shoes, laces, got a velcro band across, and it's SBD cleats, so they're recessed up inside the sole. I think what happened with the others, I've done so much walking in them, I had them since 2016. They're my main touring shoes and hosteling shoes, and I just ground the soles down so the cleat was protruding, and it just eventually snapped off last week. So yeah, new shoes feel lovely. That's looking back at the ancient hill foot of Old Sarum. very circular with a big moat. And there's a footprint here of the original Salisbury Cathedral. It says here it was demolished in favour of a new one at Salisbury, begun in 1220, so you can see lots of remnants of the footprint. And that's looking eastwards, and that's the direction I'm heading. Steep drop over there down into the valley. Again, I'll put the link to the English Heritage website there, so there's all the information that could be of interest if you want to know more. That must have been absolutely spectacular when the cathedral was there, and you can see the new one there, the spire sticking up there. Again, a second defensive point, and then over there on taking that track, that's pretty precipitous down there. That's where I'm heading, that minor road along there where those buildings are. Then I'll be turning right off it shortly across the River Avon. Now down off Old Sarum, this lovely little track along this minor road. I'll be turning left by those brick buildings, then right down a footpath which takes me up the other side, across the River Avon and up the other side. I think it's going to be a lovely day. I'm so looking forward to this, I really am. Just made me realise last week, riding an old Roman road, just made me see what I thought was familiar terrain in just a completely new and different light, and just a different perspective basically. This was that first river crossing I did last week, and I mistakenly said the Wiley. The Wiley's much further in the direction I'm heading, goes through Wilton. I should have known, but this was just so unexpected. I just didn't know this was here, this small footbridge. It's down the end of Mill Lane, and then it just turns into a footpath, but you sense it used to be an old minor road. This is absolutely gorgeous. The seat just behind me, what looks like what could be a good wild camp. I don't think I'd risk it here, it's probably a little bit too popular and residential really. That's looking back the way I've just come, crossing the river. It's a bit of a push up here. The new shoes are making walking so much easier, there's so much more grip on the sole. Looking back at Old Sarum there, right up on the hill. And then this way, it's not a main road, but it's certainly a sort of busy B road. I'm going to go straight across there. After crossing that road, it does say no cycling, and you go up behind some garages, so I respect that. It's only about 100 yards, and then it turns into this footpath. Now I know I sort of said I wouldn't cycle footpaths, but this I know was rideable without having to dismantle the bike and everything. It's just a chicane there to stop you. Stop motorised vehicles or motorbikes getting up there. Easy to do on a bike. You cut across here, and then we're going to snake up through these back streets, and then there's a track going up through a nature reserve, and it takes you up through those woods across over to Wilton and the Wiley Valley. So I've just emerged from that footpath there from the valley, and at this crossroads you do a right here, carry on up here, and then we're going to take a right hand track up through those trees there through Bemerton. But just here, if you were to go straight across where that bin lorry is, just behind there, there's a spar. So that's a good place to pick up supplies. There's going to be another one at Bemerton, and then there's a co-op and stuff in Wilton. And after that, you really do need to be self-sufficient, because there's a long stretch this morning, as last week, where there's just nothing. You need to be well stocked up. So yeah, here, Bemerton, Wilton, and then that's it for the rest of the morning. Just come up from where the spar was, joined this road where the car's just driven by, and then turned up. This is signposted as a no-through road. This is Barnard's Hill, and as you can see for motor vehicles it's a cul-de-sac. Then we're cutting through there. This is just a nice little pedestrianised cut through from one residential area to another. There's going to be a Premier store along here. Like I said, the second place to pick up supplies after leaving Salisbury. That's what we've just done. Come up there. It's called Bemerton Folly Nature Reserve. You can see why it's so lovely and what made me want to come back here. This is just a real find. Then you're back on some residential streets. Along there is a Premier store. There you go, just came through that gap between that house, and there's like a little youth centre. There's a few shops here. Premier Express Inn. That's the second of 3 places where you can stock up before the off-road section. Then that's a school over there, I believe. I remember going down, you go up towards the school and then you turn left just before you get to it along a track. So I've just turned left at the school gates. I'm taking this very rideable track behind some garages. So the school's going to be on my right hand side, and this will eventually turn in to a service road. And that track eventually turns into a surfaced service road, and hey ho, that's where the tree was blocking my way last week. It's been cut already. That's good. I thought that might be weeks or even months before it's sorted. You can see where they've sawed it off. A lot of debris there. Just chuck the residue over there. So yeah, we're going to carry on down here past the quarry, and not going to turn right into it today. And then we'll eventually get on the A36. I can pavement it along there, along to Wilton. That's the track I've just come down. Last week I went through there, the old quarry, and that's where they sort of said they'd let me through, but they knew I wouldn't get through some double gates which went underneath this railway here. And you can see there's some old sidings. It must have been quite substantial, this quarry, when it was open. And the main line railway is just the other side of there, and then the other side of that is the A36. Go literally just yards away. There's the main Bristol to Southampton railway. That would be looking back up towards Bath and Bristol. And then you may hear I'm about to join the busy A36. When you join the A36, it's about half a mile. One side there's a short cycle path, the other side is pavement. So what I'd say is either ride it very, very cautiously. I don't think anybody's going to object. There's no garden paths coming out. Just be very careful. Pedestrians obviously get off and push. And then rather than take the A30 main road down through Wilton, it's literally a few hundred yards long there, I just carry on here and take this more minor road down. The thing is, this is one way and it's going against us, but it just, you know, it's a great way to force you to just walk down and see all the stretches of the River Wiley flowing through. It splits a bit here, it crosses in several places, but it's just a fantastic way just to slow your pace down, even from cycling pace, and just really notice what's here. This is the street I've just walked down, so you can see there's a co-op, post office, a one stop, there's plenty of cafes and places to stock up here. Just a really nice place to sit and chill out, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I think keep talking about stocking up because I'm going on an off-road section where nothing's made me hungry actually. So I've got 2 apple Danish and a mini Coke. After my snack in Wilton Square, which is just round the corner, I came along this short stretch of A30. It's not very busy, and then you turn right here towards Great Wishford. Just as we pass under that railway bridge, that's where the fork goes off to the left. That's where the off-road begins. You very rapidly start gaining altitude, and to my left to these houses, this is pretty much where they end up here. For today, I'm so looking forward to this. I'm going to leave the residential area. We're just about to enter the tree line. As soon as you enter the tree line, you get this fork. So you can see on the left is a farm track, private, and on the right is a bridleway. Access to this bridleway is on foot, on horseback or on a bicycle. No motorcycles. That's the way we're heading. After that fork, between looking back now, the farm track on the right and my bridleway on the left, you think there's virtually no difference between the two. They're separated by a few feet, and maybe my bridleway is about a foot higher, and this really is where they split. So that's the farm track going up there. We're leaving a bit of tree line now, and you can see the road's dead straight and it heads up that coniferous forest. That's Groveley Woods. When that track splits and the farm track goes over there and this carries on in a dead straight line, it looks like it's going on a long way and fairly steep, but it's not. It's very easy to ride, and very soon you arrive at the woods. Here's the avenue of trees, And it must be drivable up here. Look, parking bay, disabled parking bay only, so it must be drivable here. So it gives you an idea. I mean, if cars can get up here, bicycles certainly can. I rode nearly all of that. I'm going to ask this guy if he knows where the trees are, because I went by them last week. This is where I was filming and the lady stopped to talk to me and told me about them. I just asked that gentleman fantastic help, because I did ride by them last week and he said it's about 400 yards along here. There's a gap in the trees and you go in about 30 or 40 feet. So I'm in no rush. I'm determined to find them today. Let me give you the view I'm looking at. This is what just blew me away last week. And of course, I'm happy to push this today. I'm determined to find these trees. As I said, that lady told me the Grovelly witches. I think I said something like the Brively witches or something like that. I went home and read about it. And the story goes, in 1737, I believe, 4 sisters from Denmark who had not long moved to Wilton were brutally executed up here because the locals thought their arrival coincided with the outbreak of smallpox, ring a bell, and they were blamed. And so they were dragged up here, bludgeoned to death. They literally had their heads beaten in, and they were buried quite away from each other because they were thought to be witches, and they didn't want to be, the locals didn't want them to communicate in the afterlife. And it's said that 4 beech trees sprung up after their death. More likely they were planted to mark the spot of what was a pretty horrific act, actually. And the lady last week told me that locals come along and just hang trinkets on it, and I looked it up on the internet and that's exactly what happens. There were 4 trees, 1 for each sister. Apparently one of them's fallen down. I mean, talked about a few hundred years ago, but the 3 remain, and one of them in particular is quite heavily decorated. And as I understand it, the locals don't really like people putting plastic on there. So I thought, I was going to leave a Roman trinket actually. But what I've decided to do is, you may have noticed I blinged up my bike last week with some white horses on the front rack and also some gold ribbon. So rather than take the ribbon off and chuck it away, I've taken it off, I've got it in my saddlebag, and that's what I hope to hang on these trees. Wow, this is absolutely gorgeous along here. So as you can see, this is the Roman road, dead straight, lovely avenue. I'm going to stop talking until I find this gap in the trees, then we're going to try and find the memorial trees. These trees are not easy to find. I went along what I judged to be 400 yards, took every single left I could take, ended up doing a big circuit back out by the barrier. In the end I saw some forestry workers along there. They've just told me, is this one down here? And look, hey, there it is straight away. So the big tree has got this wooden ring around it, and it's almost more or less sort of saying keep out. What a wonderful old tree. And I am going to keep out as well. I don't really know the folklore here. People have climbed up and put trinkets on, but I've come across this one. Look, it's one of the branches come off it, and I've added my yellow gold ribbon, chariot ribbon, to link it with the Roman road going through there. I've made sure the loops are very, very loose so it doesn't stunt any tree growth or damage the trees in any way. There you can see. Wow. Wow. What a beautiful tree, but what a horrible story behind it. thank you to those lovely guys who helped me find this. Well, that's how close it is to the Roman Avenue where they are. They turned up just at the right time to help me out. Some people believe these woods are haunted, and others have said you can hear the march of Roman soldiers tramping through there. Hard to imagine on such a lovely day as today. It took me quite a while to find this. It is not easy to find, but now I have found it, I think, oh gosh, how on earth did I miss that? But you know, it's like a lot of things in hindsight, it's easy once you know how. I'm so glad I had the time, really, because I was getting a bit frustrated thinking this is really difficult, and I think I just made it more difficult for myself. So glad I found it. It was quite moving, actually. I don't know why, just a sad story, and it just was, really. But just really enjoying this again, coming through here. It's so nice knowing I've got all day. Don't even care if I don't get back to dark. Bearing in mind, as the crow flies, I'm not that far from Salisbury. I've taken about 4.5 hours so far. But that's what I love about touring, just not rushing. I've just done quite long sections through the woods after Groverley, and I've just emerged where that white van is and the people along there. And this is the road I said I was familiar with last week, so that would drop down to the village of Wiley in the Wiley Valley, which is running down the bottom of that hill, right to Salisbury, left to Warminster. And I guess going along the Wiley Valley Road on that minor road, which is the Worcester Cycleway, I always think of Wiley, the village of Wiley, as being halfway between Salisbury and Warminster. So I'm about to leave the woods just round this corner and get on that piece, which I thought was a farm track at first last week, but it just goes on for quite a long time actually. So I'm looking forward to this. It really opens up now. Within a few hundred yards of twisting, turning through the woods on gravel, there you go, look, I'm on this what looks like a farm track, a metalled road. And this is the bit I really wanted to come back to. This is one of my two favourite parts of the first day of last week. Groverley Woods, and then this section, which I thought was initially just a short farm track and then maybe a muddy track onwards, but this metalled road goes on for quite a long time. Suddenly emerges from those trees and just opens up. Oh, I can see the reflections off car windscreens on the A303 over there, and I'm on this just lovely quiet road along here, which, as I say, feels like it may just go to a farm and then fizzle out. It actually goes on for a fair old distance before we get to some country lanes, and that's where I'm going to deviate from my road from last week and try and cut out a bit of the A303 in a different way. I've been looking forward to coming back here so much. This is superb. I've just crossed two minor roads. The second one last week I turned up that way and headed across the A303. This week I'm trying to go south of it. At the moment it's rideable, but in the far distance that looks like a massive traffic jam going eastwards on the A303. See if I can zoom in. It seems to be moving quite freely right to left, but left to right looks like a traffic jam. So you can see we're running parallel to it. I've just approached and joined the A303 from the south. Very familiar spot. That's where I came through last week and decided I had to ride along there. You see it's just about to turn into dual carriageway, which actually feels safer, more room for things to get past. And within about quarter of a mile there's a gap in the central reservation and I turn right. I was hoping to emerge a bit further along there and then come back along here against the flow of traffic, but like on a gravel road this side, so I haven't quite come out where I thought I would, but at least it's familiar. I've just crossed that busy A303 where the gap in the central reservation is that I used last week. I'm back on this forestry road now. In between there's two great ridge signs, but yeah, look at this. It's gone 1 o'clock because I spent a lot of time up at Groveley Wood. But I'm in no hurry. I'm really fancy lunch at the same spot as last week. I just loved that view so much. So I'm going to press on in maybe 2 o'clock before I have my lunch, and then not long after that I'll be dropping down towards Sutton Veny. This is just so good. It really got that piney smell of being abroad. And I keep harping on about it, but about 2 miles over there and downhill where I'm heading later, very, very familiar terrain to me. This feels like I could be in Austria or France or somewhere. Back at my lovely lunch spot from last week. Every bit as good. Didn't even need to book a table for lunch either. Then I'll go along there. I can hear all the traffic from the A350 just that way. I think that's the road, that straight bridleway along there I'll be taking, and then dropping down towards Sutton Veny. Within a quarter of a mile of lunch, looking down that gorgeous view, I've just come along there. I'm at this kind of crossroads where I was last week. Last week I cut across that A350, that's the road just in front of me, straight through that gate with the green sign on. It's like an organic farm, and that's where it got a little bit interesting. This is what I'm going to do today, head down here. I'm pretty sure that guy on the scooter's just come along here. Perfectly rideable, and it actually says to Titherington. So when I looked at the map, it looked like if I go straight on and go to Titherington, and then it looks like it forks off to the left along here, and you can also get down to Sutton Veny. Either of the two would do, preferably Sutton Veny because it's in the direction of my travel, but you know, as I said, either would do, but I'm really looking forward to this. About a mile into this byway section, you can see it's gorgeous up here. The road splits and the main byway carries on there, off to, well, straight on, and there's my one. I was hoping to turn off to the left, and I can see the main one is a byway, that's dropping down to Titherington, and then off the left is a restricted byway, and I'm hoping that'll get me down to Sutton Veny. As I understand it, a restricted byway is you've got access with the permission of farmers or landowners, but it does mean they can restrict that access at any point. I mean, for farming reasons, safety reasons, anything like that, possibly shoot, that sort of thing. So yeah, let's hope I can get across there. But look how gorgeous this is. This is wonderful, heading towards that farm. I can see just over to my left hand side there's a lorry heading down that hill. That's the A350. I could have always gone down there, probably isn't too bad, it's not a particularly busy road and it's going downhill, so it's not as though I'll be struggling with traffic behind me, but I mean, this is just so much nicer. I'm really excited to think I've never been along here. There's a few farms and even private houses up here. It's gone from like chalky rough stuff onto tarmac along here. Wow. This is where I've just come. Looks like I'm dropping down steeply now into the Wiley Valley. You can see it's much greener and lush down there. You can just about see a car going along there. It's probably A36, that white car. Not busy enough for the A303. Church spire there, imagine that's Sutton Veny. Going to drop down steeply, Now you can see the outskirts of Warminster over there. That very distinctive hill above it that goes along with the trees and then curves down. Now on the village green at Sutton Veney, so back of there about half a mile I guess. I came down from the right, dropped down very steeply. It's actually called Hill Lane, which seemed appropriate. I'm now on this road that runs into Warminster actually. Very familiar with this, like I said, it's all part of the Wiltshire Cycleway route I know, so this is pretty much bread and butter to me back home now, about 20 miles. I'm going to finish the video here, but I will give you a little idea of what's coming up in a few weeks time. I hope, and I'll explain the reason I say I hope. I mentioned it several times over the winter. I'm heading up to East Anglia in June the 13th actually. It's a Monday. I'm getting the train from my hometown Bath Spa to Paddington. Then I'm cycling from Paddington to Liverpool Street to get a train up to Ipswich. When I ride between Paddington and Liverpool Street, I'm going to go and visit 6 World War I memorials. They're managed and run by the English Heritage. It's quite an unusual collection actually, from the well-known to the quite obscure. And then when I get to Ipswich, I'm going to spend the first night at Ipswich Travelodge. And then the plan is to cycle up over a week all round the East Anglia coast, that sort of circular bit, Suffolk, all round to Norfolk. And I've located 26 World War I pillboxes. These were the ones that have intrigued me. They're either circular or hexagonal, very unlike the ones down here, which are more rectangular. And I'm also going to go and visit a few places with historical links to the First World War. For example, the first ever air raid in Britain. And a few streets away from where that occurred, there's a link to it as well. And you'll almost certainly not recognise the person I tell you about, but you'll certainly recognise the family business that he went on to inherit. In fact, you'll have probably used their product many times. And then there was also some shelling around that coast. There's quite a lot of interest in heritage, which is what interests me. As I head towards my final night, where I'm going to spend at King's Lynn Travelodge, both the Travelodges are already booked and the train tickets. There's a lot of beaches around there which are well known for seal colonies, so I'm really looking forward to that. I hope I see some, but you know, the coastline is pretty spectacular. And then get a train back from King's Lynn to King's Cross, then it'd just be straight across London, Paddington back to Bath. The slight concern I've got at the moment is there's been strike action just authorised by the RMT unit, but it could well impact me. Each journey was about £50, so that's £100 in train tickets, and I've also booked the first night and the last night at Travelodges, and they were both at £45–50 each, so I've invested £200. So you can see there's a little bit of a concern. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I'm not going to pull my hair out or start getting all twitchy about it. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm sort of thinking about that triangular route using Roman roads. There's always a backup, you know. If it happens, it happens. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I hope it doesn't, and I hope the next video you see is, you know, the story of my First World War heritage tour around the East Anglian coast. Each night I'm going to try and recount a story that I came across when I was doing the research, and some of them, they're very obscure and they're fascinating. Back to their day anyway. Just going to have a few minutes here, looking around for a bin to dump my rubbish from lunch. I'll be going to Warminster soon. I might stop and get an ice cream there and then head back to Bath. So if you've got this far, thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.